Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Pielka. Today is August 2, 2024. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also, want to thank John Gordon for inviting us to our guest today, Robert M. Scotto. Is that right, Robert Scotto?
Well, you could pronounce it that way. I usually pronounce it Scotto.
Scotto, thank you. Robert
Right.
Scotto, this is part two. Where in the heck you calling in from?
New York City.
How cool is that? We had a lot of fun in
No,
part
it's hot.
Steady. Oh, it's hot. Well, I'm in Venice, California, and it's hot, but we get a little ocean breeze, so we're lucky. But I was really impressed with part one. I reviewed it and I learned a lot, Robert. And, when we started, I said, "What's the best thing for a human being?" And you said something like "Long live the living," which is a Louis Buñuel quote. And then you thought you were quoting Beckett saying life is for the living. And I loved it because I'm a quote freak and I looked it up and it's actually Langston Hughes. And he said, life is for the living, death is for the dead. Let life be like music and death a note unsaid. Really beautiful because I know you're into music and poetry. So there's a lot going on there. Hollis Frampton, experimental filmmakers, said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. And there's so much more. My question to start off is, can you forget to die?
Forget to die?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure you said that. Uh, I don't know if you can forget it. You certainly can't avoid it. And the best thing to do, in my experience, is not to think about it. The people who think about it are the ones who are living death. And you have a limited amount of time. I think you need to do it living rather than thinking about dying.
That's good. Yeah, because isn't it Blake who said, you become what you behold?
Hmm.
So there's two more on this death thing I would like, because these were recent. I spoke with Louis Kemp, who was a friend of Bob Dylan's when they were 10 years old, and then he helped him later in his career. And Louis said, you can't take it with you, but you can send it ahead. Any thoughts on that in regard to death or in any context?
Well, my only problem is I'm a lifelong atheist and believe there's nothing after dying. So the only thing I could send ahead to my children is the money I have left and the lessons that they learn from me. Other than that, I have no control over the future.
Right. And this is and last one on this topic is Sweet Honey in the Rock founder, the great Bernice Johnson Reagan, a singer and a historian of music. She just died last week, and her quote is, I was here before I came, and when I die, I'm not leaving.
Well, she would make a very good Hindu, and
Yeah,
uh, one of the hardest things raising a child is to explain your point of view when it's different from their mother's. Their mother was a spiritual person, and I am not. And I remember uh, sitting down with my daughter and telling her I really didn't believe there was anything before or after. And then, I mean, of course, she took this very hard. And afterwards, I thought about what a French philosopher has said and how smart. He said, the advice of the old is like the winter's sun. It gives some light but little warmth.
oh, but little, what's the last word?
Warmth.
Oh, little warmth.
There's no
That,
consolation.
yeah, advice of the old. That's beautiful. I like that. And so you were with your wife for how many years?
Let's see. About 20. When we divorced, the children were in their late very late teens. So, yeah, about 20 years.
And what is the most in your um, experience with that? And how many kids did you raise?
Two.
Two kids. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Well, if you want me to draw a general rule from my two children, uh, my daughter was much faster learning everything, uh, walking, crawling, talking, whatever. My son was so laid back, so casual about the next step in life that we thought he was slow for a while, but he was just taking it at his own pace. And then when he finally dawned on him one day that, oh, I could do that, he did it. He walked, he talked. So my general conclusion is women get there first, men take their time and assess how women did it so they get it right.
Oh, that is great. And assess how they did it. Yes. There's a funny little saying, I'm not saying it's true or not, that the word mafia begins with the letters MA because women run the world, but they let men think they run.
Right, right. Uh, yeah, the quiet power, the hand that rocks the cradle, etc. Yeah, I don't know. It's been so long, but I remember in elementary school, the girls were way ahead of us. I mean, and and I thought, an outstanding student, but the girls just blew us away until about age 12, I would say, around puberty hitting. Then men caught up, but until that time, it was no contest. I mean, if the Olympics were run for pre preteens, the women would sweep every category.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, I could understand that in terms of in evolutionary terms, they have to be on the case a lot earlier and more aware of life's exigencies way before men because they have to deal with them on a daily basis.
Well, why do you think women live longer than men?
The old state, the old one of the old expressions used to be because we do all the work and get tired and fall apart really easy. No, the one of the it's kind of a footnote to that is that I've noted as my friends and associates and so on start dying that men who live alone do not do nearly as well as women who live alone. This is just from my own personal experience. Women seem to form bonds with other women very easily. Men don't.
Yeah.
And I think that the I mean, in the case of my father, for instance, he died within months of my mother after she died. It just had nothing, there was no reason for him to go on living, it appeared. So, one answer, I think, is that women are much more socially amenable to trying new things after a certain age, and men aren't. Uh, and this leaves them alone. And when you're alone, I mean, the big thing about getting old, to me, the major thing is don't do it alone.
Don't do it alone, right? Yeah.
No, no, it's hard enough. It's hard enough to get old, but doing it alone is just awful. It's
Yeah.
and again, so I think women also women. You probably know this from your own experience. Women are far more attuned to healthy living, quote unquote, than men are.
Yeah.
Diet, exercise, uh, taking care of the daily status quo. Men, uh, myself included, tend to let the women do it. You do it so well, why don't you do it?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're gaining the strength and experience, and you and you're just passing through the time with, I used to say, empty calories.
Empty calories, great words. Robert, hold on. I want to get my headphones because the sound still is a little low. So just lean in the best you can to the mic, and we'll. Okay, so let's see. So, anyways, the question is about matriarchy.
Uh, Now you're talking now about the. Are you talking about the anthropology, the evolution of patriarchy, or
Well,
my fix
it
on it?
it's hard to define what it's really matristic, but we know that probably early on women kind of ran the household.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some people go, well, when? The question's a little open-ended, and again, you put the questions into the context you want, but basically is what caused matriarchy?
Oh, matriarchy, I could understand uh, from the when I mean I've read this and I can't point out at this moment exactly where, but in several places that they've uncovered tombs, prehistoric tombs, where older women were buried with great honor, but they were not part of the aristocracy or they were not queens or princesses. And the assumption is that they were the fund of knowledge, of accumulated knowledge of the clan, the cult, the club, whatever, and that they were revered for the simple fact that well past childbearing, they were still very valuable. Whereas a man, once he can't hunt anymore, what good is he? He's just really, he's just eating up calories and using the resources and not contributing anything back. Whereas the older woman with her knowledge of herbs and spices and poisons and so on was valuable until the moment she died.
Yeah, it's heavy. So, very good. So McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness or human sensorium. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Maybe even non-tangibles, say philosophy or religion, extends consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? It's been a major tool for you as a writer,
All right,
whether it's a keyboard or a writing
all
utensil
right,
like a pen. What humanness does it extend for you?
right. Okay, there. I do, as everybody does, very different kinds of writing. I'm not talking about writing a letter or writing a reply to an email, but when I'm trying to write either critically or creatively, I'm learning as I'm writing. And I look at that sentence that I just wrote and analyze it and said, how did I possibly write that word there when obviously this word is much better? So by looking at what your pen has produced, or your finger in the case of the keyboard, you're learning more about language, and therefore you're learning more about how to express yourself. And the most important thing in language is communication. So if you're communicating, if I want to communicate to you something that my insight into a work of literature or a person's psyche, if I can do it better than someone else, then that just means that that pen has made me indirectly a better thinker.
It's good. The poet critic Helen Vendler just died recently, and
Oh, she was one of my heroes.
she's amazing. And in her obit
Yep.
in the New York Times, it was a great quote. She said, "I write to explain things to myself."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I met her when she was just coming aboard. She was just hitting the big time. Uh, she, she did was at the Grolier Club in New York, and I was a young academic, and I was elected. Don't ask me why. Secretary. So I was taking minutes of each appearance, and she appeared, and she did in an hour a deconstruction of Keats' To Autumn, which was mind blowing. I mean, we all know Keats' poems are intricate and complex and marvelous. But what she did was to explain how Keats was able to communicate the most complex idea in a way that made it beautiful. And that's why beauty is
Yeah.
truth. But
Oh,
yeah, I mean, which is not To Autumn, that's the Grecian urn. But and why poetry matters. It matters because it can do something with language that you can't do any other way.
yeah.
You know what
That
Faulkner said? He said, the ode on the Grecian urn is worth any number of grandmothers.
say it again, Robert. I missed it.
Ode on a Grecian urn is worth any number of grandmothers. Who can, it's valuable. Its value is far greater than relations or.
Yeah.
So anyway,
No, this is good because it leads perfectly in what I'm trying to understand here. We'll start with Milan Kundera. He wrote the book The Unbearable Likeness of
yes.
Being.
Hmm.
And this is a quote. This is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can. Now that's metaphorically that sounds poetic, but really it sounds like, oh, you mean you're writing a character and then some divine thing comes into you and the character goes farther? Any thoughts on this? The
Oh,
character,
I
yeah,
understand that. I understand that entirely. Great, right? We're one of our book groups. We're doing Philip Roth's American Pastoral, which is a masterpiece. I think it's his best novel, and whatever. But page by page and line by line, the narrator, who is a persona of Roth, is Nathan Zuckerman. He's the narrator of many of Roth's books. Is learning as he's going along about human nature and writing about the learning about human nature, so that as he's writing, he's becoming bigger and smarter. This is what I think Kundera was talking about. That I can create a character who can go where I can't, because my imagination can take him there, but I can't get there physically or psychologically myself. And I'm thinking that Zuckerman is so much wiser than Roth, who was a little bit narrower in his analysis of human nature. So yeah, I agree with that quote entirely. A writer learns how to be a better writer, and by being a better writer, he has become a fuller human being.
right, because then we go into Steve Martin loved to quote David Mamet. Art is a product of the unconscious mind.
I
Again,
know
it
that.
sounds, but Robert, listen to it sounds like romantic and poetic, but it
Yeah,
sounds kooky, like, oh, you mean you're not writing this
right,
consciously?
right, right.
So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I don't think he meant automatic writing. I don't think he meant he was being dictated to by a higher power. I don't think that was his point. The uh, When people use the word unconscious in reference to art, I think they really mean what used to be called inspiration, which means the spirit comes inside you.
Yeah.
And the evolution of the word genius is interesting. The genius to the Romans was a local deity, your household deity or whatever. And you were possessed by genius if the god helped you. But then the Romantics, by the time you get to the Romantics, the word genius became the thing you were rather than the possession that took place. He is a genius is very different from he was possessed by genius. And so, to answer your question, uh, or to attempt to answer your question, I think he's talking about that moment that every writer gets when everything falls into place and you can't account for it by any logical or deductive process.
Yeah. You
We've all had
can't,
that experience, yeah.
yeah, you can account for it. I like that. So now, perfect. Um, just staying on genius for a second, because T.S. Eliot and everybody quotes him. Uh, great a poet is, or someone who steals. Now I can't even think of how it word, but the quote. It's like, uh, if you steal, you're a mature poet. If you borrow, you're an immature poet.
Yeah,
And
right,
so so
exactly, right.
so let me. And then Frank Zappa said, a genius is someone who steals and you can't tell who they stole it from. But
Right.
I mean, anyways, this whole thing leads me to one of my major questions I've asked for 40 years. And two of my film heroes have the mantra, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas, right there in New York, said, there is no self expression. And a great jazz pianist right there in New York, Cecil Taylor, said, I'm just a vehicle, and this stuff just comes through me. So the question, Robert, is art making more self expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Yeah, I'm of the old school. I'm of the school of hard work, and I think that every inspiration that you get didn't come from an outside source. It came from within.
Yeah,
It's just your brain putting it together in a way that it hadn't been put together before. So it's
yeah,
not mystical, it's not magical, it's not spiritual. It's merely the magnificent thing we call a brain, its process of analyzing information and putting it into a form that that you're looking for at that time, an articulation of of some idea. But I don't think there's anything magical about it. I mean, it's it's not it's not explicable necessarily how that happened. How did you come up with that phrase, for instance? Well, your brain did it, and your brain did it because it was working with what you fed it. It isn't working with from outside sources. So you are ultimately responsible for it, even if you can't explain how it happens.
yeah. You're you tapping into that word they use so much now, curating. Well, I curated what came into me, and then Duchamp loved it. He said the artist of the future will only have to point.
Well, the ultimate curator is the brain. It's
Is
it's
the
uh,
brain, right?
it's every time I learn something new about it, it's astonishing what goes on there. And you know that David Dennett died recently, uh, the philosopher who is most famous not only for being an atheist, but also for denying this sense of consciousness, that we are not conscious beings, we are the product of the brain's narrative.
Yeah.
And and uh, and you know all of the lab tests where you think you're going to do something, but the brain had already come to that or pointed you in that direction. Uh, it just the brain is so astonishing. Uh, that, well, I'm speechless when I think of what it can do and also how it does it. I mean,
Yeah.
just think about it. You've got trillions of possibilities at any second going on there, hundreds of different chemicals in operation in the brew. It's, evolution is. I used to tell my class when we covered Darwin, because they didn't want to believe. They really didn't want to believe that everything happened by chance and accident, and the survival of the fittest. And I said, the greatest miracle of all is that chance could produce the brain. Good Lord, you don't need a God. This is
That is good, Robert. But let's go back so I clarify this. David Dennis, Dennis?
no Dennett, Dennett. He was
Dennett. Okay, great. And so Dante says he prayed to the muse to aid him. How do you address that statement?
oh, to the muse.
Oh, yeah.
Oh well, I mean that's standard epic invocation. Uh, all of the epics begin with asking the muse to help them sing their song. Uh, the Odyssey, the Iliad, Paradise Lost, Dante's Commedia. It's a convention, uh, and the muse of epic poetry, Aratov, was the one that all of the epic poets uh, requested their help for. But think about it. The Commedia, Dante's Commedia, is arguably the most perfect work of art ever created.
Yeah.
It's got to be up there.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't need a muse to do this. This man, if you learned his apprenticeship, how he learned how to write, where he learned how to write, what he was writing about, and over the course of 3 or 4 decades, to create an entirely new form of literature in a language that was not recognized as a language.
Yeah.
Italian was not a language. Hey, how about the irony? He wrote about a defense of the vulgar tongue of Italian. You know what? He wrote it in Latin because you could not write a critical or theoretical piece unless you wrote it in Latin, because nobody else would understand it. The guy in the next town would not understand your Italian. There was no such thing as Italian. There were different dialects and different. So he more or less created modern Italian at the same time that he created a new kind of work, at the same time that he summarized an entire age. It's astounding.
Yeah. Yeah,
He didn't need
truly.
he didn't need the muse.
He didn't need to. And my funny thing about Joyce, and you know what BVDs are?
The underwear. Yeah.
Yeah, the underwear. And Joyce mentions BVDs, the underwear, in the wake.
Oh
And
yes.
I think he's hinting B is Bruno, V is Vico, and D is whoa, Dante.
What
And
happened?
oh, I don't know. It cut off a couple times, but basically the B is Bruno, the V is Vico, and D is Dante. But Robert, we have to go back for a second because I left this out. After the vehicle question, is art making, writing more a vehicle or more self-expression? I forgot to ask, can writing be egoless?
Well, you could write something in the third person and create a narrator who's utterly unlike you. So in that sense, maybe it's possible. One of the one of the things I had my writing students do was to write a sentence like, "She is ugly, nasty, and brutish." And this change it to I am nasty, brutish. And that the difference is that the character that you've created, I am nasty and brutish, is a you've created a character, but now it's in the first person. If you create it in the third person, you have removed the ego from it. But if you're saying, can someone write something in a way that is not imbued with the personality and ideas and prejudices, and no, I don't think it's possible. I mean, even the greatest novelists are identifiable by who they are. Think of Tolstoy. I mean, or even Joyce. Joyce, every goddamn page that Joyce ever wrote has something about his personal life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It, I don't mind it. I love it. But the idea is that it was impossible for him to just absent himself from the writing process. And I think great writers are able to create objectivity, but they can't create it by simply removing themselves from the picture.
Yeah.
Think that marvelous painting by Velázquez, La Meninas, where the painter is like a minor figure, but he's there, you know?
Yeah, it's really good. Robert, such a delight to talk to you. I learn a lot, and you really are well versed in being articulate and concise. I thank you, because this is what McLuhan said: you can't understand me unless you study all of Joyce and all the symbolists. And so he took off on what Joyce said. McLuhan said, I'm applied Joyce. And what Joyce said was, I'm applied Aquinas.
Yes.
Now, why would Joyce say that? Can you suss that out? Why would Joyce say, I'm applied Aquinas?
Well, Stephen says that.
Yeah.
See, uh, and Stephen was educated by the Jesuits, and since I was educated by the Jesuits also, I can point
Yeah.
out that Aquinas at that time was the quote unquote official philosopher of the Roman Catholic Church. He
Yeah.
was literally the one who spoke the truth in philosophy,
Yeah.
and therefore he's the one you learned. I remember having a textbook. We didn't use it because the teacher was enlightened and said it's a joke, but it was Aquinas versus all other philosophers. So you would have a chapter, Augustine and Anselm versus Aquinas. And then I grew up thinking that Kant, Fichte, Hegel was one person.
Well, what's the main thing when he says, I'm applied Aquinas? What's the main core, like the chewy nut center? Like,
Well, in a portrait of the artist, his discussion in chapter 5 of aesthetics is really applied Aquinas.
yeah.
It's taking Aquinas's ideas about unity and quality and so on, and placing them in a current setting, so that yes, Stephen was the product of his education, but I also think that Joyce was being somewhat ironic, and Stephen is not necessarily likable in chapter 5 and in Ulysses. He's not the warmest and most likable of compared to Bloom, who everybody swoons over. Stephen is something of a cold fish, and part of the reason is because he's purely intellectual. He's a walking brain who really has to be educated about humanity by Bloom. That's part of the reason he becomes the son of Ulysses
Yeah.
at the end. So with Joyce, John Gordon says this all the time. By the way, we're 2 or 3 sessions away from finishing Finnegan's Wake.
And then you're going to repeat and keep going?
I don't know. I don't know if I can do it because it's taken us 13 years. So,
Wow.
so, but I, as John Gordon says, Joyce never says something without also saying its opposite.
Right.
So, uh, yes, Stephen is a product of applied Aquinas, but that's not necessarily a good thing or the big picture.
Yeah. Really good, Robert, because this is leading to this. My friend has a theory about music, the three T's: taste, technique, and theory. So you've learned the technique of music and the technique of writing. You know the theory, the structures, and whatnot. How does one acquire taste?
Ha 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 ha. I have every intelligent person I've ever spoken to about music or literature has had a different taste than I have. It's not, it isn't, for instance, I mean, I'll give you a specific. I happen to love the symphonies of Bruckner.
Yeah,
People hate them.
yeah.
Educated people, serious musicians hate them. It's like what Mark Twain said: Wagner's music isn't as bad as it sounds. You know,
Right.
it, they hate it. To me, it's a journey, and I just want to go with that journey through the music. I'm not necessarily trying to understand it. I'm trying to experience it. My
Yeah,
taste, my taste is determined by so many different factors other than
yeah,
what I know about theory and what I know about technique that it's hard. I mean, you can't even Aquinas said you can never. This is not a direct quote, but you can never exclude the emotions in any philosophical discussion. You simply can't account for the complexity of a person, and that in turn determines his taste or
yeah,
what he likes. So I would say taste is something that's an accumulation of all of the other factors added to your personality, your experience, what moves you.
yeah.
Uh, uh, there are certain composers, I'm not going to mention them because I don't want to make enemies, who leave me cold. Just
Yeah.
I can appreciate their technique. I can appreciate their all of the energy and work that went into producing this piece of music. I can truly appreciate, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
So,
That's good, Robert, because most people go, how do you acquire taste? And they go, exposure. You went a little deeper and used some bigger words. Accumulate personality. I like what you said. But when you said one thing, it reminded me of T.S. Eliot saying, poetry can communicate before it's understood.
oh, well, he was wise to say that because this is true of the wasteland. People got the wasteland before they understood it.
Yeah.
Even with his footnotes, which, by the way, make it harder rather than easier, I think.
Yeah.
But they got the message of the wasteland long before they understood even most of the allusions. There are so many of them, and some of them are really arcane and bizarre. But yeah, I can understand that. If you've ever, one of my one of my ideas was just listen to a Shakespeare sonnet, and it's when you finish it, you say, "Well, that's really terrific." And then when you look at it, you realize how difficult it was to put this thing together so
Yeah.
that it did this.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a different level of appreciation when you're talking about the experience of the poem and then the examination of the poem.
Yeah. Really good. Examination and experience. So this is Bertolt Brecht asked Charles Lawton, why do you act? He said, he says, because people don't know what they are like, and I think I can show them. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yep. By a rough analogy, uh, Freud was asked how he knew so much about the human being, and he said, "I read novels."
Wait, who said that?
Freud.
Oh, Freud said I
Yeah.
read novels?
Right. It, the A great playwright in Ibsen, forget about Shakespeare, but a great playwright can bring together in 2 hours a picture of human nature that's stunning
Yeah,
and astounding. Uh, and a good actor is really inhabiting a part rather than playing a part. I always
yeah,
think act really great actors don't act. They don't act. They're lit. What they're doing is living that role. They're
yeah,
not acting it. They're not playing it. And a great actor can make a great series of actors can make a play into something transcendent. I remember one of the first plays I saw on Broadway was Uncle Vanya, and it was at the Old Circle in the Square. And George C. Scott played the doctor, Nicole Williamson played Uncle Vanya, and uh, Julie Christie played the romantic interest. That's quite a cast, and
really?
they're all good actors. They're all fine actors. They're not
Yeah,
just. But there was one moment. I'm sitting. It was theater in the round. I'm sitting, and at this particular moment, Nicole Williamson is on my left, Julie Christie is on my right, and George C. Scott is right in front of me. And he turns to her and he says, "Do you understand, madam?" And it was life coming, not an actor playing a role. There was something about the theater. I'm a big believer in live performance. I love to go to plays. I love to go to concerts. I'm not a big fan of film, not because it's not good. It's wonderful. I like live performance. I also like when there's a boo boo on stage or a bad note I mean, it's life. But that moment made me realize just how a good actor isn't playing a role. He's really suffering from the loss that he's going to have to part with this woman whom he can't have. He wants but can't have. Uh, so yeah, a good actor can well certainly can make or break a play,
yeah.
but you do need the play. You do need the script,
You do
and
need the playwright and the script and the words.
yeah, you gotta
You know,
have you
you
gotta
you
have the
you
stuff.
you said some important things there, and it leads to Igor Stravinsky because it comes out of what Lawton said in a way. It's similar, I think. I don't know if it's similar, but I'm curious your reaction. Igor said most people don't know what they like what they know.
Well, that's sure. There's a comfort zone. Uh, Sometimes I'm for one very happy when I go to a concert where I know I'm going to see a piece that I love, but something new, something different, something I never heard before, a work that was never performed, because that's get me out of my comfort zone. This is music that is different than the one that I like. Let's try give it a shot. Um, I think one that I also he was. I don't know what the context of his remark was, but I get a hunch that people were saying, they're not comfortable with your work. And Stravinsky probably wanted to say, I'm not supposed to make them comfortable.
Exactly.
They're supposed to be uncomfortable.
Exactly.
when they or disoriented or reoriented, not comfortable. You don't want to
Yeah.
be sitting there saying, "Oh, how sweet." No, this is something meant to challenge your
Yeah.
idea of what comfort is. So, in that context, he was. It's not a praise of people. It's not,
Yeah.
he's not being nice.
Yeah. Well, Robert, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Your hunch or your guess?
The cave artist.
Yeah.
And what was the last thing? I didn't hear the last. Your,
Your hunch or your guess. You know, the anthropologists,
oh, okay.
they
Yeah.
say what was the motive of the cave artist. More like what's your hunch or your guess was their motive.
I haven't had too much experience, but in my experience, there were two different kinds of caves that they found. They found caves that were easily accessed, and then they found ones that were very difficult to get to and harder to explain. You know, what the hell were these people doing down here? Uh, Not only does geology change and what was easy to get into is now hard to, but it seems that they were, first of all, they're pretty good. I don't know if you know them. They're damn good. I mean, I can't do it. I can't do what these people did with their chalk and dyes. But I think they were really not only articulating but glorifying their life.
Yeah.
Uh, the hunt is predominant. It's usually wild animals in motion. So therefore, fleeing or challenging or whatever. And the animals were the animals around them. They weren't mythological figures. They were, created out of imagination. These were real bison and deer and so on. So I have these were artists who were doing what artists do, which is to bring life alive.
Bring life alive. That's beautiful. Yeah. So I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago, the movie director, and I says, why do video editors, rock video editors, feel so obliged to edit fast? And most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in the 80s with MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. And Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Yeah, well, one of my problems with that is that I've always believed that Sesame Street taught children not how to read but how to watch television.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think it's a brainwashing. We get things in small bites, and these bites we're supposed to, you know, think that that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Have you? I mean, I've had very smart students who told me they've never read a novel.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, uh, so all I could say about that is, if he's saying, if Scorsese, whom I respect tremendously, if he's saying that we have learned to do it better
No,
and
he's
therefore we
not.
could do it faster.
He didn't say it. Michael Apted said it.
Okay,
Yeah.
if he's
But
saying up to this,
Michael's a great director too. But
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
sure. Uh, if he's saying we can do it faster because we've learned to do it better, I agree. That's
Yeah.
with skill. With skill, you can do something uh, far more quickly than you than you did 10, 15, or 20 years ago. But if he's saying that this summer is a product of civilization's advance, oh no, no,
No.
no,
Because
no.
that's like, someone answered by going, yeah, we have Evelyn Wood speed reading. And so really the hidden question, Robert, is can humans literally multitask?
I can't. So my answer is going to be no. If I try to multitask, I screw one up.
Yeah,
I always do. Now there are
yeah,
people I know who can do two things at one time,
yeah,
but I question whether or not they're doing both of them as well as they could if they
yeah,
did each one separately, and
exactly.
I don't believe is possible.
You know, your statement, Sesame Street taught kids how to watch TV, it really resonates with McLuhan. He said, all advertising advertises advertising.
Right, right. You're sure people if you look, I can't stand advertisements on television, but if you look at them, they're not really very different from the shows. They're
Hello.
yeah,
That's
I
it.
mean,
It's just it's teaching you how to watch their language and read
that's
it.
right. Yeah,
That's, you know what Marshall said also? Advertising is the cave art of the 20th century.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sadly.
I
Okay,
know
Robert.
I know they're necessary, the advertisements, but
Yeah.
uh, you know what the Italians did? I don't know if they still do. But when I lived in Italy, all of the advertisements were shown at the end of the evening's uh,
Yeah.
parade of shows. And I think it was 11 o'clock. This is going way back. At 11 o'clock, then you had the carnival. It was called, and these were the advertisements. It was the most watched show, and you know
Ah,
why?
why?
Because the quality that went
Is
into the advertisements
yeah,
was superior to the shows.
yeah. Yeah, it's quality. I mean, all the greats worked in advertising, from the guy who wrote Wizard of Oz. It's Analyst. I did a whole lecture on him once, like who all the great artists who were in the ad business first. Okay, here we go. Robert, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
What was the first word? I just want to be sure before I.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, compromise.
Well, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. You've accomplished a lot. How do you rate these three elements, luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, the second, and the third?
I would say skill. Uh, Still possible to get pretty far with your own talents and skills. Uh, Luck, you know, people are born with luck. If you're born into a rich family, your chances of success are a little bit better, and your chances of getting a better education are better, and your chances of being exposed to what's really good in life are better. So luck plays a pretty good role. Uh, but I think skill can still be considered. I'd rather have skill than luck or chance. I really
And
would.
my question used to be, is ambition based more on fear or joy? Not for you,
Ah,
but your observations of humans in general, is ambition based more on fear or more on joy?
oh, fear.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, my old students keep on calling me back and telling me how awful the people they work with. And I said, in academia, you used to say, the reason people are so nasty is because the stakes are so small. so, so it's, you have people fight. It's very Darwinian in that sense.
Yeah.
Uh, you're you're kind of fighting for your life,
Yeah.
and therefore conflict can benefit you. Uh, so yeah, I
Is
mean, I wish it weren't that, but it
Yeah.
is.
Very wise, Robert. I appreciate this. Is loyalty based on reason?
No.
T.S.
No, look
Eliot.
at look at
Yeah, go
look at look at who's following Trump. I mean, come on.
ahead.
Reason? Is it,
Ay, ay, ay. Okay, T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
this is one of the oldest questions. Can you think without words?
Yeah,
Can you think? Can you have an idea that is wordless?
yeah,
And I can't, but I people tell me that they can. I don't know how.
yeah,
And I would say that for me, everything evolves into language.
yeah,
Um, it's got to be the triumph of the brain is language. I mean, how the hell did the people survive as a troop unless they communicated?
yeah. I forgot to tell you, Theater the Oppressed, the guy, no, the guy who's in Augustus, uh, the guy in South America, the theater guy, he says theater is the first human invention. So I've tried to suss out what was the first human invention. And it could have been the line or the gaze or the tool or whatever. There's a million guesses. But I think theater encapsulates it all, because theater is a way of language, and that theater was the first a human invention. But my favorite answer ever was, what's the first human invention? And the student said, lying. Which is a form of theater, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember reading that certain other mammals are capable of lying. We're not the only ones who've mastered it.
Yeah,
We, but yeah, I mean, lying implies that you know the truth is otherwise,
yeah,
but you know also that the person listening is going to think that your truth is truth. It's very
yeah,
subtle, very,
yeah,
very complicated. And, what's a white lie? What's a black, dark lie?
yeah,
But, but if you're talking about the first invention, again, I have to think it's communication of some sort.
yeah,
So, I mean, theater would is a generic term that could fit
yeah, yeah,
any
yeah. I mean,
communication.
yeah, I'm not even answering the question because we got so many other more important questions to ask. Like this one, Robert. Is perception reality?
you some of the, I'm going to be a little bit evasive here because some philosophers are sure that the brain is perceiving reality in such a way as to ensure that you survive. And this doesn't necessarily mean you're getting it accurately. You're getting what the brain thinks, if you want, you
Yeah,
need to get through this situation. So perception can be possibly incorrect, but useful to you at that particular moment.
yeah,
No, I think it was Hume, David Hume, who said everything begins in perception, or maybe it was Locke. It was Locke. Everything
yeah,
begins in perception,
yeah,
uh, and 95% of the time this is true. I think.
yeah.
You know, the other 5% is magical thinking.
Magical thinking. I love those two words. Okay, so in your many years you've been doing Robertness, professor, philosopher, writer, father, all these things. Tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
Oh, the change is easy. I've become far more compassionate and less egotistical. That's guaranteed. The one thing that's changed that hasn't changed from the very beginning is my conviction that the only thing that really matters is how well you live your life, because no other ideology can help you do that except by your experience and your adjustment to experience. So that the one thing that hasn't changed is my conviction that this is all that is.
But Robert, did you get that's beautiful? Did you get that more from the way your parents raised you, or more on your own?
Oh no, that's me. My parents were wonderful, but they were immigrants, and for them, my father never spoke English, for instance. Uh, for them, providing for the children good food, clothes, home was all that mattered. Intellectually, I I was, not just me, my other siblings too, way beyond them in elementary school. So,
Yeah.
uh, other than being nurtured and cared for and loved, my ideas, I mean, some of my ideas would horrify them. you know, my atheism would destroy them. But no, it's me. I am responsible for who I am.
Yeah. Okay, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh, okay. Uh, I had a very difficult childhood in the sense that I was physically in the hospital for long stretches of time, several different occasions, and this made me turn inward and become completely self-absorbed as a child, um, which I think is a terrible thing to be, because it it cuts off your your relationship to the rest of the human race. So that weakness, my self-absorption, has modified through time to the point where I'm capable of empathy, which I wasn't capable of early in my life. I was
Yeah,
not empathetic at all.
yeah. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when,
Well, anger. I've not had very good experiences with anger, so when you could use it to turn someone away from making a tragic mistake. I, I'm thinking of one situation with children, where I, I had to get angry in order to make it clear that I was serious that they should not do X or should do X differently. Uh, but generally speaking, I never got angry with my children,
yeah,
and except, and even then it was an act. I wasn't really angry. I was.
yeah. Yeah, you used to ask, can anger be a productive emotion? And people go, yes or no. And then I morphed it into that. And one guy, when I used the second question, he goes, anger can't be a productive emotion. So it's interesting. But Utah Phillips said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
I assume that's rules of living, right?
Well, you put in the context you want. Yeah,
Okay.
whatever. Yeah.
As a true American, I would say me,
Yeah.
and I'm entitled to make the rules. But I'm also, I think, wise enough at this point in my life to understand that that was a bad rule and I should change it, you know. But I really want to be in charge of my life. And
Yeah.
in order to be in charge of my life, I've got to make the parameters by which I live it.
Yeah. Well, Robert, that's perfectly leads into the question, what does freedom mean to you now? And I'll set it up because etymologically, the word freedom comes from giving oneself one's own laws.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's two quotes. T.S. Eliot. Freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation, which caused McLuhan to say, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology and calling the whole thing freedom? So, anyways, what does freedom mean to you now?
Okay. Two kinds of freedom. Isaiah Berlin, bless him, talked about two kinds of freedom: freedom from and freedom to. I want to be free from outside manipulation and control,
Yeah,
and I want to be free to develop my life the way I want to, as long as in the process I do not prevent somebody else from developing their lives as they want to, which is another way of giving you Kant's imperative. You know, act as if the thing that you're doing could be made into a universal law. What more do you want than to be able to shape your own life?
yeah, it's true. So this is great because I've asked people for years, what do they think of Louis Buñuel? He says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. You know, and it's a cute quote, and everybody goes, "Oh, I agree with that." One guy finally says, "That's bullshit because if I'm seeking something, it's because I want to find it." And
Right.
so I morphed it into the question. The cliche goes, "The journey's more important than the destination." Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important?
Exactly. Yeah. What is the meaning of life? Uh, pick from the following 6 million alternatives.
Yeah,
But I don't think, unfortunately, life has a purpose. Life has a meaning. You give it a purpose and meaning. The universe doesn't give a shit about you, you know,
yeah,
and therefore you have to more or less create your own purpose and meaning. And I wish people wouldn't spend so much time creating it from outside human experience, because that
yeah.
just deflects us from reality. So yeah, I don't think life has a meaning except the one you apply to it.
Yeah. Robert, it's great because if you ask John Cage, what's the meaning of life? He'd go, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer. But it's also the people who sat in Paris in the 20s and changed the world were flaneurs, and it was called psychogeography. And they just wandered aimlessly and sat at coffee shops and did nothing. They were slackers, and they changed everything because it was like Joyce saying, epiphanies in everydayness.
Yes.
Yeah. But I asked my friend who wrote comedy, can satire be destructive? And he said that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
If you, by the way, comedy is very hard to write.
Yeah.
Much harder to write than a lyric poem or something,
Yeah.
Um, and the distinction between comedy and satire is one of the distinctions that have always interested me so much. The great stand-up comedians that I remember from my youth uh, were always walking that very tight line between being funny and being deadly serious. uh,
Yeah.
and I think satire is, if it's done correctly, a corrective rather than a destructive act. In other
Yeah.
words, you're saying this guy is ridiculous, and what he's doing is is painful to people. The object is for people to see that this is a destructive act, and that and you don't want to be like that. You want to be like somebody who's correcting the problem rather than making the problem. So good satire, I believe, has a high moral purpose.
That's
And
funny because McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen. And is this what you're saying? He said, "Behind every joke, there's a grievance."
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and the harder the joke is to take, the deeper the grievance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Gurjeet, but before I say it, what's the function of laughter?
Oh boy, Bergson wrote a great book on that.
Who did?
Bergson, Henri Bergson.
Bergson. Oh, yeah, he
Yeah,
did that. Yeah, that Henri Bergson.
yeah.
Yeah.
The it's you. Your laughter is usually a release, but there could be painful laughter. There could be you could laugh and cry at the same time. I think it's the body's physical catharsis,
Yeah. That's
and
good.
it's evident in many different ways.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say body because that's what my mom taught me. She said crying and laugh, like if you laugh till you cry, crying gets toxins out of your body.
Mm-hmm.
It's physical, but we think crying is an emotional thing. You're getting emotions out, but you're also getting physical, and that's like you laugh so hard, you're tearing up, you're dropping toxins out of your body. It's
That's pretty.
healthy. Yeah. So there's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into "You are what you hate." In fact, James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Mm-hmm.
And Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So, so what's your reaction, Robert, to this line? You create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, Robert, but like one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that?
It's the way that's it's formulated in such a way that it makes it seem as if the resistance and the creation are part of the same act, and I can't see that being possible. I
Yeah,
I I, I mean, I can create a situation where I will impel myself to do something because there's resistance that I've got to overcome. You know, uh, doesn't matter what it is. If I'm an athlete, going faster or going higher or whatever. But the resistance is not, if the resistance is inside of you, that's almost schizophrenia. So
yeah.
it's got to be outside of you. And
Hmm.
if you're working against the resistance that's outside of you, then you can't create that. That's already been in existence without your help, without your aid. I'm troubled by that formula, but
Yeah. No, it was good. So it's I appreciate you think about these ideas I throw out and you really, give me well thought, concise reaction. So that's what I'm after. I appreciate it because it really evoked. Leo Bersani just died about a year ago, and he studied Mallarmé, the symbolist, and he said a line that I've always tried to suss out, and I'm not sure the wording, how the words go. I mean, this is the exact quote, but here's the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So the words that I'm like crises, threatens. I don't know if those are too extreme, but you get the sense of what he's saying. What's your thoughts on that line?
well, the problem that a poem has to overcome. How about if I put it that way?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. The problem that a poem has to overcome will will be found throughout the poem. In other
yeah,
words, it will. I think Frost had a great way of putting it. I can't remember uh, that the poem journeys on its own making, something like that.
yeah.
But
Who
the
said that?
Robert Frost. But that's
Oh,
not an
Robert
exact.
Frost. Oh, yeah.
But that's
Oh,
not an exact quote.
oh, I love Frost. They said, "What's the meaning of this poem?" And he goes, "You mean you want me to tell it to you worse?"
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Or when
Okay,
Picasso had somebody in his atelier, he said, "I keep on looking at your pictures, but I don't understand them." Picasso said, "Who said to look is to see?"
okay, Robert. A few more, and we're out of here. This has been so fun. How do you find peace of mind?
It's actually much easier now than ever because I'm old and retired and require a lot less to be happy. Uh, so I find peace of mind generally in a good book that's new to me or that I'm rereading and getting more out of it the second time than I did the first time. Uh, generally, it's I find my consolation on pages.
That's back to Mallarmé. He says everything ends up in a book.
Right.
I love it. Okay, here's 5 Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words. One, who started it all?
Who? Okay. I don't know.
Two, are we going to make it?
Probably not.
Three, where do we put it?
You don't want to know my answer.
Four, who's cleaning it up?
Not the government.
Five, is it serious?
Yes.
Wow. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't get old.
That's I went to my grandmother's nursing home once years ago, and this lady yelled out, "Let tomorrow worry about itself." If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Oh, that's good. I've never thought of that. Uh, my life in different chapters.
Nice. And they want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
uh, what smell? Oh, jeez. Basil.
Beautiful. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Where would I would want it to be displayed in one of my universities where I attended or taught, and I want it to be made of ice.
Ice, beautiful. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Oh, I've never had a yacht, and I never wanted one.
Right. You know the answer I get the most? Fame, money, and heroin.
Heroin.
That is weird. I have gotten the choice of a yacht. Okay, Robert, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Pray.
Pray?
Pray, no, Pray.
Prey.
No, Pray.
You would pray,
Yeah.
but
What
you're
else?
an atheist. You're an atheist.
Exactly.
Well, you know one of my favorite answers. You love it being a literature person. This woman on the Venice boardwalk, I asked her that question. She said, well, I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit and use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. And I said, do you know that's the Descent into the Maelstrom Poe's short story? You know, he studies the
Right.
pattern and he saves himself. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Inspires me?
Yeah.
Oh, the young being involved in the environment.
Yeah. And to think, you know, Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring in 62. It's taken us this many years to even raise any consciousness. What's
Well, because the big money is not going to. I mean, the big money is in energy,
Yeah.
and they're not going to cut their own throats.
Yeah.
So what they do is they pour it into. I one time read a book about all of the patents that General Motors and Exxon bought up that could have led to tremendous solutions and just buried them.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
it's
that's human nature.
yeah. Okay, what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
The future of this country.
Yeah.
Uh, not only are the disturbing trends lately, but these trends have been energized in ways that are spooky. I mean, I've read several accounts of the Republican convention. They sound like religious revivals.
Yeah.
I I can't believe serious adult human beings are acting this way.
Yeah.
So
Really? It's unbelievable.
yeah,
Okay, this is two-part. How has being an educator shaped your behavior? And then the second one will be, how did your book on moon dog shape your behavior?
oh, the first one is I learned to be patient and listen. Um, when I first started teaching, I was lecturing and not really paying attention to what the people in the classroom were doing. But as time passed, I started to listen to them, and even though a lot of it was silly and childish, they occasionally came up with marvelous new ways of approaching the work that I've been teaching in a certain way for so long. So patience and listening.
Nice.
The second, the Mundo, it has made me so glad that I'm not in the show business. I,
Not in show business.
no, I
Right.
mean, getting a movie made, getting an album made. There was a recent Moondog album put out. I wrote the liner notes, and I attended several concerts, of the group that the. Oh, one of them is out there by you, the Kronos Quartet.
Oh, Kronos did Moondog.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. Yeah.
they did a Moondog, part of a Moondog album, and I am so happy, A, that I'm retired, and B, that I didn't choose to go into um, any kind of um, entertainment business of any kind.
Yeah.
These, I don't, I mean, you are, what you're doing is radically different from what these people are doing. And, and I just don't understand how you could live in a world of such great uncertainty, you know?
Well,
You
Robert,
get up,
what's one thing that you left out of the Moondog book in retrospect? You might said, "Oh, I should have put that in," or you left it out on purpose. Is there any like thing you could talk about in
yes,
that regard? Yeah.
I left out a lot of the stuff that I personally was involved in, rescuing his his work that he left behind and things like that, because it didn't it didn't seem to me relevant to the story of his life. But second, the thing that I would want to have spent much more time on, and I didn't, I spent only a little time, was actually the way he composed and the physical restraints on the way he composed and how that helped determine what he composed. I didn't spend enough time doing that.
I see. Okay, two more and we're out of here. Thank you again, Robert. It's truly been fun. This is Thornton Wilder in 28. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Well, uh, you want the cosmic, you want the. Uh,
Well, you put in the context you want. You can do it any way you
I know.
want. Yeah. The practical or the cosmic or both.
It's really all about living the fullest life possible, and part of living the fullest life possible is making other people live the fullest life possible.
Yeah.
Everything else, as the rabbi said, is just commentary.
Yeah. But the word make, suss that out. How do you make other people
Well,
live full?
you affect in whatever way you can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What gives you the most optimism?
the way my children turned out. They're
Yeah.
both sophisticated and decent people.
Yeah.
The important word is decent.
Yeah.
They turned out to be good human beings.
See, that's amazing because that's the answer I get the most on that question. The first question I asked in part one was, what's the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's been a pleasure and an honor to spend this time with another
Good
person,
fun again.
especially because it was you, Robert. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I do too. Thank you. Take care. Say
How
hi to
many?
John. I'll
Oh,
see him on Wednesday.
Tell them thanks for the intro. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.